Every word of criticism that reaches your ears carries within it the potential to either destroy your peace of mind or accelerate your growth. And the difference between these outcomes lies entirely in how you choose to receive and process what you hear. Most people spend their entire lives either desperately seeking approval or defensively avoiding criticism, never realizing that both responses surrender their power to external voices that may or may not have their best interests at heart. Welcome back to those who've joined us on previous journeys into practical wisdom. For newcomers, consider subscribing. We explore how ancient insights can transform the most challenging aspects of modern life, one deep conversation at a time. Criticism is perhaps the most revealing test of our philosophical development. When someone questions our choices, challenges our beliefs, or points out our failures, we discover instantly whether we've built our sense of worth on solid internal foundations or on the shifting sand of other people's opinions. The reaction that emerges in those first moments, before we have time to compose ourselves or manufacture an appropriate response, reveals the true state of our inner development. Seneca, who faced criticism from emperors, philosophers, and common citizens throughout his life, developed a sophisticated understanding of how to extract value from even the harshest words while maintaining emotional equilibrium and personal dignity. His approach wasn't based on thick skin or emotional numbing, but on clear thinking about what criticism actually is and how it can serve our development when approached with wisdom. Consider the last time someone criticized you, perhaps a supervisor pointing out mistakes in your work, a family member questioning your decisions, a friend expressing disappointment in your behavior, or a stranger on the internet attacking your ideas. What happened in your body? Did your heart rate increase? Did your breathing become shallow? Did your mind immediately start formulating defenses or counterattacks? Did you feel a surge of anger, a wave of shame, or a crushing sense of inadequacy? These reactions are so universal that we rarely question them. We assume that feeling defensive when criticized is natural and inevitable, that the emotional turmoil that follows harsh words is simply part of being human. But what if these reactions aren't inevitable at all? What if they're learned responses based on mistaken beliefs about what criticism means and how much power it should have over our internal state? Seneca understood that our reaction to criticism reveals more about us than the criticism itself reveals about our actual worth or competence. When we react with immediate defensiveness, we're revealing that we've placed our sense of identity in the hands of others. When we're crushed by negative feedback, we're demonstrating that we lack confidence in our own judgment and values. When we dismiss all criticism without consideration, we're showing that we're more committed to protecting our ego than to pursuing truth. But there's another way, a way that allows us to remain open to valuable feedback while maintaining our emotional stability and personal dignity. This approach begins with understanding what criticism actually is and what it isn't, what we can learn from it and what we should ignore, how to separate useful information from emotional manipulation or personal attack. The first principle in handling criticism wisely is recognizing that criticism reveals as much about the critic as it does about us. Every critical comment is filtered through the critic's experiences, biases, fears, insecurities, and agenda. Understanding this doesn't mean we dismiss all criticism as projection, but it does mean we consider the source when evaluating the validity and usefulness of what we're hearing. When someone criticizes us, they're not delivering objective truth from a position of neutral authority. They're sharing their subjective interpretation of our actions, filtered through their own perspective and motivations. Sometimes this perspective is valuable because it reveals blind spots we couldn't see ourselves. Sometimes it's distorted by the critic's own limitations or agenda. Often it contains elements of both truth and distortion mixed together. Seneca taught that wise people learn to separate the wheat from the chaff in criticism. extracting whatever genuine insights might be present while discarding the elements that reflect the critic's own issues rather than our actual shortcomings. This requires the kind of emotional stability that allows us to listen without becoming defensive, and the kind of intellectual honesty that allows us to acknowledge our flaws without being devastated by them. The second principle involves understanding the difference between criticism of our actions and attacks on our character or worth as human beings. Someone might accurately point out that we made a mistake, used poor judgment, or fell short of our own standards. This kind of feedback can be invaluable for growth, even when it's delivered harshly or with poor timing. But criticism often goes beyond specific actions to make sweeping judgments about our character, intelligence, or value as people. This kind of character assassination isn't actually criticism at all. It's emotional manipulation designed to make us feel small so the critic can feel big. Learning to distinguish between legitimate feedback about our behavior and illegitimate attacks on our personhood is essential for maintaining both our growth mindset and our self-respect. When someone says, "You made a mistake in that presentation," they're offering feedback about a specific action that we can evaluate and potentially learn from. When someone says, "You're incompetent and always mess things up," they're making a sweeping judgment about our character that says more about their need to feel superior than about our actual capabilities. Seneca understood that we serve neither truth nor our own development by accepting character attacks as valid criticism. At the same time, we serve neither truth nor our own development by rejecting specific feedback about our actions simply because it's uncomfortable to hear. The skill lies in learning to extract valuable information about our behavior while rejecting unfounded judgments about our worth. The third principle involves recognizing that our need for approval and our fear of criticism both stem from the same fundamental error: believing that our worth as human beings depends on other people's opinions of us. When we desperately seek praise, we're outsourcing our self-esteem to others. When we're devastated by criticism, we're doing the same thing from the opposite direction. Both responses give other people enormous power over our emotional state and decision-making process. We end up living not according to our own values and judgment, but according to what we think will generate the most approval and the least criticism from others. This is a recipe for both personal misery and mediocre achievement, because we're constantly adjusting our behavior to please people who may not understand our situation, share our values, or have our best interests at heart. Seneca taught that true freedom begins when we stop seeking validation from others and stop being devastated by their disapproval. This doesn't mean we become indifferent to feedback or dismiss everyone else's perspective. It means we evaluate criticism based on its accuracy and usefulness rather than on whether it makes us feel good or bad about ourselves. How much energy have you wasted over the years trying to avoid criticism or defending yourself against it? The fourth principle in Seneca's approach to criticism involves what we might call the practice of grateful reception, learning to genuinely appreciate criticism that helps us see ourselves more clearly, even when the delivery is less than graceful. This isn't about masochistically enjoying harsh words or pretending that cruel comments don't hurt. It's about developing the wisdom to recognize that someone who points out our genuine flaws, even imperfectly, is offering us a gift that our friends and flatterers may not have the courage to provide. Most people surround themselves with others who tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear. This feels comfortable in the short term, but it leads to stagnation in the long term because we never receive the honest feedback that would help us identify and correct our blind spots. The person who has the courage to tell us uncomfortable truths about ourselves, even if they do so clumsily or with mixed motives, may be doing us a greater service than those who only offer praise and encouragement. Seneca practiced looking for kernels of truth even in unfair or hostile criticism. He understood that emotional reactions to criticism often indicate that we're being confronted with something we don't want to acknowledge about ourselves. When criticism stings particularly sharply, it's worth examining whether our reaction stems from the injustice of false accusations or from the discomfort of hearing truths we'd prefer to ignore. This practice requires tremendous intellectual honesty and emotional maturity. It's much easier to dismiss criticism wholesale when it's delivered harshly than to sort through hostile words looking for valuable insights. But those who develop this skill gain access to feedback that others miss entirely, accelerating their personal and professional development far beyond what would be possible if they only listened to gentle, supportive voices. The practice of grateful reception also involves recognizing that people often criticize us most harshly in areas where they themselves struggle. Someone who attacks our work ethic may be wrestling with their own discipline issues. Someone who questions our integrity may be dealing with guilt about their own ethical compromises. Someone who mocks our ambitions may be frustrated by their own lack of courage to pursue meaningful goals. Understanding these dynamics doesn't invalidate all criticism, but it does help us interpret it more accurately. Sometimes the critic's personal struggles make them hypersensitive to similar issues in others, giving them insights we might miss. Sometimes their criticism reveals more about their own insecurities than about our actual flaws. Often the reality involves elements of both. The fifth principle centers on what Seneca called the discipline of response, learning to choose our reaction to criticism consciously rather than simply responding from habit or emotion. Most people have developed automatic patterns for handling criticism that were formed in childhood and never consciously examined or updated in adulthood. Some people automatically become defensive, immediately launching into explanations or counterattacks whenever they're criticized. Others automatically become submissive, accepting all criticism as valid regardless of its source or accuracy. Still others automatically become dismissive, rejecting all feedback to protect their ego. None of these automatic responses serves us well in the long run. Seneca taught that we can train ourselves to pause between receiving criticism and responding to it. In that pause, we can ask ourselves several crucial questions. Is there truth in what I'm hearing? What can I learn from this feedback? How can I respond in a way that serves my growth and maintains my dignity? What response would be most likely to lead to a constructive outcome? This pause doesn't eliminate emotional reactions to criticism. We may still feel hurt, angry, or defensive. But it prevents us from being controlled by those emotions and allows us to choose responses based on wisdom rather than impulse. We can acknowledge our feelings without being driven by them, remaining open to valid feedback while maintaining appropriate boundaries against unfair attacks. The discipline of response also involves learning to ask clarifying questions when criticism is vague or unclear. Instead of making assumptions about what the critic means or becoming defensive about ambiguous accusations, we can ask for specific examples, concrete suggestions, or clarification about what changes they believe would be helpful. This approach often transforms hostile criticism into constructive dialogue because it demonstrates that we're genuinely interested in understanding their perspective rather than simply defending ourselves. It also helps us distinguish between critics who are offering genuine feedback and those who are simply trying to make us feel bad without any constructive purpose. The sixth principle involves what we might call the practice of selective implementation, learning to extract useful insights from criticism while ignoring elements that don't serve our development or align with our values. Not all criticism is created equal, and not every suggestion should be followed simply because someone took the time to offer it. Seneca understood that we must ultimately be the judges of which criticisms deserve our attention and which changes would actually improve our lives. This requires clear knowledge of our own values, goals, and circumstances, areas where others may have limited insight. Someone might criticize our career choices without understanding our financial situation. They might question our relationship decisions without knowing our personal history. They might challenge our priorities without comprehending our deeper purposes. Wise response to criticism involves filtering feedback through our own understanding of what we're trying to accomplish and what kind of person we're trying to become. We can appreciate someone's perspective without accepting their conclusions. We can acknowledge their good intentions without following their advice. We can learn from their insights without adopting their agenda. This selective approach requires confidence in our own judgment, not the kind of arrogant confidence that rejects all outside input, but the mature confidence that can evaluate feedback thoughtfully and make conscious choices about how to respond to it. We must be neither so insecure that we accept all criticism as valid nor so defensive that we reject all feedback as invalid. The practice of selective implementation also involves recognizing that some criticism comes from people who don't understand what we're trying to accomplish or who actively oppose our goals. A person who values security above all else might criticize our willingness to take calculated risks. Someone who prioritizes conformity might attack our efforts to think independently. A person who has given up on their own dreams might mock our ambitions. In these cases, the criticism itself may be accurate in its description of our behavior while being completely wrong in its evaluation of whether that behavior is problematic. Someone might correctly observe that we work long hours while incorrectly concluding that this demonstrates poor life balance rather than temporary dedication to an important project. Learning to distinguish between accurate observations and valid conclusions is crucial for extracting value from criticism while maintaining confidence in our chosen direction. We can acknowledge others' perceptions without accepting their interpretations or recommendations. What would become possible in your life if you could receive criticism without losing your center or closing your mind? The seventh principle in handling criticism with wisdom involves understanding what Seneca called the fortress of inner worth, developing such a clear sense of our own values and identity that external opinions, while considered, cannot shake our fundamental sense of who we are and what we're working toward. This isn't about building walls against all feedback, but about establishing internal foundations so solid that we can remain open to input without being destabilized by it. Most people build their sense of worth on external validation, achievements, recognition, approval from others, social status, or material success. When any of these external supports is threatened by criticism, their entire self-concept wobbles. They feel compelled to defend not just their actions but their fundamental worth as human beings, because they've made criticism of their behavior equivalent to attacks on their identity. Seneca understood that this external foundation for self-worth is inherently unstable because it depends entirely on factors beyond our control. Other people's opinions change, circumstances shift, achievements become outdated, recognition fades. When our sense of worth depends on these external factors, we become emotional slaves to forces we cannot influence, constantly anxious about maintaining approval and devastated when we inevitably face disapproval. The fortress of inner worth is built on different foundations entirely. It rests on our commitment to living according to our deepest values regardless of external recognition, our dedication to continuous growth regardless of temporary setbacks, our willingness to pursue meaningful goals regardless of others' opinions, and our determination to treat ourselves and others with dignity regardless of how we're treated in return. When our sense of worth comes from these internal sources, criticism becomes simply information to be evaluated rather than a threat to be defended against. We can listen to feedback about our performance without questioning our fundamental value as human beings. We can acknowledge mistakes without feeling worthless. We can accept that we have flaws without believing that those flaws define us. This internal foundation doesn't make us immune to the emotional impact of criticism. Harsh words can still sting, unfair attacks can still anger us, and disappointed reactions from people we respect can still sadden us. But these emotional responses don't destabilize our core sense of identity or derail our commitment to our chosen path. The eighth principle involves what we might call the practice of proportional response, learning to match our reaction to criticism with its actual significance rather than responding to every critical comment as if it were a life-threatening emergency. Most people react to minor criticism with the same intensity they would bring to major threats, wasting enormous emotional energy on feedback that deserves only brief consideration. Seneca taught that we should evaluate criticism based on three factors: the source, the accuracy, and the importance. Criticism from someone whose judgment we respect deserves more attention than feedback from someone whose opinion we don't value. Accurate criticism about important matters deserves more consideration than inaccurate complaints about trivial issues. Constructive feedback that could help us improve deserves more energy than destructive attacks designed merely to hurt us. This evaluation process helps us allocate our emotional and mental resources appropriately. We don't waste time and energy defending ourselves against every casual comment or random opinion, but we do pay serious attention to thoughtful feedback from knowledgeable sources about matters that actually affect our goals and relationships. The practice of proportional response also involves understanding the difference between criticism that deserves a response and criticism that should simply be noted and ignored. Not every critical comment requires a defense, explanation, or counter-argument. Sometimes the wisest response is no response at all, especially when dealing with people who seem more interested in provoking a reaction than in offering genuine feedback. Learning when to engage and when to disengage requires wisdom about both the critic's motivations and our own goals. If someone is offering feedback that could help us improve, engagement makes sense even if the delivery is imperfect. If someone is simply trying to make us feel bad or start an argument, engagement usually feeds the dynamic we want to avoid. The ninth principle centers on what Seneca called the transformation of opposition, learning to use criticism as fuel for improvement rather than allowing it to discourage or derail us. This involves a fundamental shift in how we interpret the experience of being criticized, from seeing it as evidence that we're failing to seeing it as information about how we can succeed more effectively. When someone points out that our communication style is unclear, instead of feeling defensive about our intelligence or competence, we can use this feedback to develop clearer communication skills. When someone criticizes our time management, instead of feeling attacked for being disorganized, we can use this input to examine and improve our planning systems. When someone questions our decision-making process, instead of feeling judged for our choices, we can use their perspective to refine our approach to making future decisions. This transformation requires a growth mindset, the belief that our abilities and character can be developed through effort and learning rather than being fixed traits that either we have or we don't. When we believe that criticism reveals permanent inadequacies, we naturally become defensive because we're protecting what we see as unchangeable aspects of ourselves. When we understand that criticism can point toward areas for growth, we become curious about feedback because it shows us where to focus our development efforts. The transformation of opposition also involves learning to see critics as unwitting coaches who are helping us identify weaknesses we might not have noticed on our own. Someone who criticizes our public speaking might be helping us realize that we need to work on our presentation skills. Someone who questions our leadership style might be pointing out blind spots in how we interact with others. Someone who challenges our ideas might be forcing us to think more rigorously about our positions. This doesn't mean we should be grateful for cruel or destructive criticism. but it does mean we can extract value even from imperfectly delivered feedback. The person who points out our flaws, even harshly, may be inadvertently helping us become stronger and more skilled than those who only offer praise and encouragement. The 10th and final principle involves what we might call the practice of dignified response, maintaining our composure and self-respect regardless of how criticism is delivered or how unfair it might be. This isn't about suppressing our emotions or pretending that hostile attacks don't affect us. It's about choosing responses that align with our values and serve our long-term interests rather than simply reacting from hurt or anger. Seneca understood that how we respond to criticism often has more impact on our reputation and relationships than the original criticism itself. When we respond to harsh words with dignity and thoughtfulness, we demonstrate strength of character that often impresses even those who initially agreed with our critics. When we respond with defensive anger or petty counterattacks, we may confirm the very criticisms we're trying to refute. Dignified response doesn't mean we never defend ourselves or never express disagreement with unfair criticism. It means we do so in ways that maintain our integrity and serve constructive purposes rather than simply venting our emotions or trying to hurt those who have hurt us. Sometimes dignified response involves acknowledging valid points while correcting inaccuracies. Sometimes it means thanking someone for their feedback while maintaining our position. Sometimes it means simply listening without argument and then making private decisions about what changes, if any, we want to make. The key is responding from a place of centered strength rather than reactive weakness, choosing words and actions that we can respect when we look back on them later rather than responses we'll regret once our emotions have cooled. This practice of dignified response extends beyond our immediate reaction to criticism to include how we talk about critics and criticism with others. When we gossip about people who have criticized us, complaining to anyone who will listen about how unfair or wrong they were, we often damage our own reputation more than theirs. When we can discuss criticism thoughtfully and objectively, even when it was painful to receive, we demonstrate the kind of maturity that earns respect from thoughtful people. The development of these 10 principles creates what Seneca called philosophical armor, not a defensive shell that keeps all feedback out, but a framework for processing criticism wisely that allows us to remain open to valuable input while maintaining our emotional stability and personal dignity. How might your relationships and your growth change if you could receive criticism as information rather than as an attack? As we integrate these principles into our daily experience, something remarkable begins to happen. We start to attract better quality feedback because people sense that we can handle honest input without falling apart or becoming hostile. When others know that we can receive criticism thoughtfully rather than defensively, they're more likely to offer the kind of genuine feedback that actually helps us improve rather than just telling us what they think we want to hear. This creates a positive feedback loop where our improved ability to handle criticism leads to more valuable criticism, which accelerates our growth, which further improves our ability to handle feedback. We stop being surrounded by people who either attack us unfairly or flatter us insincerely, and we start attracting relationships with people who can offer honest perspective when we need it. The transformation isn't just personal, it's relational. When we demonstrate that we can receive feedback without becoming defensive or wounded, we create psychological safety for others to be authentic with us. This authenticity deepens our relationships and improves our decision-making because we're working with accurate information about how our behavior affects others rather than polite fiction designed to spare our feelings. Seneca understood that one of the greatest gifts we can give to others is the demonstration that honest feedback is welcome and will be received thoughtfully. Most people go through life rarely receiving honest input about their behavior because others fear their defensive reactions. When we can model a different way of receiving criticism, we give others permission to be more authentic in their relationships as well. The principles we've explored also transform our relationship to our own mistakes and shortcomings. Instead of being devastated when flaws are pointed out, we can appreciate the opportunity to address issues we might not have recognized on our own. Instead of wasting energy defending imperfect choices, we can channel that energy toward making better choices going forward. This shift from defensive to growth-oriented thinking affects every area of our lives. At work, we become more effective because we can learn from feedback about our performance rather than being derailed by it. In relationships, we become more trustworthy partners because people know they can discuss problems with us without triggering dramatic emotional reactions. As parents, we model for our children how to handle criticism and feedback in ways that promote learning rather than shame or defensiveness. Perhaps most importantly, mastering the art of receiving criticism frees us from the exhausting work of trying to be perfect or appear perfect to others. When we're no longer afraid of having our flaws pointed out, we can stop wasting energy on defensive strategies and image management. We can focus instead on actually becoming better rather than just appearing better. This liberation from the need to appear perfect allows us to take appropriate risks, express authentic opinions, and pursue meaningful goals without being paralyzed by fear of criticism. We can speak up in meetings knowing that our ideas might be challenged. We can start new projects knowing that our early efforts might be imperfect. We can enter new relationships knowing that others will eventually see our flaws and limitations. The confidence that comes from knowing we can handle criticism effectively is qualitatively different from the fragile confidence that depends on avoiding criticism altogether. It's the difference between strength that comes from tested resilience and apparent strength that comes from avoiding all tests. Seneca's approach to criticism also reveals something profound about the nature of human growth and learning. We cannot develop beyond our current limitations without accurate feedback about what those limitations are. When we make criticism the enemy, we make growth impossible. When we learn to work with criticism skillfully, we accelerate our development far beyond what would be possible through self-reflection alone. The ancient philosophers understood that wisdom requires both self-knowledge and external perspective. We need others to help us see our blind spots, challenge our assumptions, and point out patterns we're too close to recognize ourselves. But we can only benefit from this external perspective when we've developed the inner stability to receive it without being destabilized by it. The 10 principles we've explored work together to create this inner stability while maintaining openness to growth. They help us distinguish between valuable feedback and meaningless attacks, between constructive criticism and destructive manipulation, between insights that serve our development and opinions that serve only the critic's need to feel superior. As these practices become integrated into our way of being, we discover that criticism becomes far less frequent and far more valuable. People are less likely to attack us when they sense our inner stability, and more likely to offer genuine feedback when they trust our ability to receive it thoughtfully. The criticism we do receive tends to be more accurate and constructive because we're no longer attracting the kind of defensive interactions that bring out the worst in others. This transformation extends to how we offer criticism and feedback to others as well. When we understand how to receive criticism skillfully, we become better at giving it skillfully. We learn to focus on specific behaviors rather than making character judgments, to offer suggestions rather than just pointing out problems, and to deliver feedback in ways that encourage growth rather than triggering defensiveness. The ripple effects of mastering criticism extend far beyond our individual experience. Families become more functional when members can discuss problems openly without fear of defensive explosions. Teams become more effective when colleagues can offer honest feedback without triggering workplace drama. Communities become healthier when leaders can receive input about their decisions without taking it as personal attacks. In a world that often seems polarized between people who attack others viciously and people who retreat into defensive isolation, the ability to engage with criticism thoughtfully represents a third way, a path that maintains both openness to truth and respect for human dignity. Every instance of criticism we encounter becomes an opportunity to practice these principles and strengthen our capacity for conscious growth. Every harsh word we receive can become a chance to demonstrate that inner stability doesn't require external protection. Every unfair attack we face can become an occasion to show that maintaining our values doesn't depend on others treating us fairly. The choice is always ours. Will we respond to criticism from fear and defensiveness, or from strength and curiosity? Will we treat feedback as an attack on our identity, or as information about our behavior? Will we waste energy defending our ego, or channel that energy toward becoming actually better rather than just appearing better? Seneca's wisdom reminds us that we cannot control what others say about us, but we can always control how we receive and respond to what they say. We cannot eliminate criticism from our lives, but we can transform our relationship to it. We cannot make everyone speak to us kindly, but we can develop the inner strength to extract value even from harsh words. If these insights have served you, consider subscribing for more explorations of how ancient wisdom can transform modern challenges. Share this perspective with someone who might benefit from a different approach to criticism. And most importantly, begin practicing these principles in your own encounters with feedback. Start with minor criticism and gradually build your capacity for handling more significant challenges. The next time someone criticizes you, you have an opportunity to practice receiving that criticism as a philosopher rather than as a victim. How will you use that opportunity?